Welcome to episode 3 of the podcast, The Coach and the Geek, along with Mark Adams of ESPN and Jeff Van Fleet of Lighthouse Technologies. Glad you've joined us for this particular episode when we talk about winning versus success. And oddly enough, those may or may not necessarily come packaged together like a set of Twinkies. And these gentlemen are going to help us break that concept down. Jeff, let's start with you with question 1 here. How does success differ from winning, and how might they be the same?
The concept of success and winning is one that we talk a lot about. In fact, we were talking today about it. Mark and I had a conversation today about that because it's not obviously clear. When you look at a sports team, for example, when you take the book, you look at that team, you know what winning is. You went home, you either had a W or you had an L. But what is success? And I remember as a high school athlete on the track team, we had a gentleman on our track team, and he was freaking fantastic. He was the fastest guy by far we had. He was the best jumper. I did triple jump and long jump. He was the best jumper we had by far. He just didn't like to show up to practice. And so our senior year, he's a junior or senior kind of with us. We made a vote as a team that even though he's the one that scored the most points, he wasn't in it with us. And it didn't feel like we're being successful together. With him, we were winning, but it didn't feel like part of the team here. And we voted him off the team.
Wow.
And we, it wasn't like it wasn't the first conversation, but this idea of what is success and what is winning, I think for me, the word success has a lot to do with a long-term connotation. It's about what positive impact you can make in people's lives, not just today, but over the long haul. And there's hard conversations you have to have around success. Like Mark talked on the earlier episode, winning in the old school was just telling them, here's what we're going to do, you need to do it, and that's the end of the story. Success is really about how do you grow your team? How do you grow young people? How do you help set an example for them over the long term, and such that it's beyond the end of the track meet or the end of the basketball game? It's beyond that, and your players feel good about themselves in a win and feel good about themselves in a loss because they know they gave it their all. They were treated with respect. They treated each other with respect. And maybe they learned a little bit of life lessons along the way.
Mark, same question. Similarities and differences between success and winning as concepts.
Ben, I learned that valuable lesson as the head basketball coach at Western Oregon University. And I was coaching a very, very talented team that was underachieving, and we were about 7 or 8 games into the season, and I knew that I was not getting the best out of my team. And so I challenged every team member to come to my office the next day and tell me how I had screwed this thing up. And I'll never forget the conversation I had with Brian Counts. Now, Brian Counts, his dad, Mel Counts, played for the Los Angeles Lakers way back when, was a 7-footer in the NBA. And Brian walks into my office and I said, Brian, look, I'm ready for anything. Tell me, what am I doing wrong? What do I got to do to get this team playing better and to our potential? He looked me square in the eye, Ben, and he said, Coach, you're a fraud. I paused, just like I'm pausing right now. And I reflected on that statement. Now, there were 2 choices here. I could throw him out of my office for being disrespectful, or I could take the hard message and reflect on it and ask him a key question. Why? I chose the second path. And Brian said, Coach, let's think about when you're in practice, what do you always talk about when we're going through our drill sequence defensively? You talk about the process. You say if we trust our process, the final score will take care of itself. You tell us on offense, if we spread the floor, get good spacing, share the basketball, play unselfish. If you trust the process, don't worry about the final score. But yet, just the other night, Coach, we're in the middle of a game, last couple minutes, big possession, we need a basket, and you end that play by getting us all together in our hands in the huddle by saying, 1, 2, 3, win. Coach, you're a fraud. That insults my intelligence. Do you think I don't want to win? Do you think all of us don't want to win? You talk a good game in practice, but when it comes down to the actual application of your philosophy around process, you don't execute it when the game's on the line. Why?
Wow.
And that's when I understood the difference between winning and success.
Mm-hmm.
Success is about a process that you believe in, that you trust, and you build that culture of we that believes in it and trusts it, and you work on it together for not just one final outcome, but to be successful over the long term. And that's what Brian Counts, that's when he taught me the difference between winning and success. And I've taken that lesson from that day for the rest of my life.
Sometimes the students do become the teacher, as I've experienced a time or three in the classroom as well. So I can understand how that must have felt, and wow, what a powerful lesson for you to share. Second question, Mark, will begin with you. In Coach Woodward's initial goal of, quote, creating a winning culture, which sounds like the typical kind of buzzwords that you hear in virtually every corporate vision and mission statement that I've ever read, how is this a shallow goal, and how can you recognize that sort of thing?
You know, it's really easy to recognize because it comes down to immediate gratification versus delayed gratification. And we live today in a society where immediate gratification is all around us. And so we're constantly tempted to go down that path of the short-term win versus the long-term work that it takes to really be successful. And that's where organizations that focus solely on winning, and I won't talk politics or anything else, but you know, there've been a lot of examples recently of how people are so focused on winning, they're willing to trample over every moray, every moral, every person in order to get to that win. But that's not success. That's just winning at all costs. And winning at all costs is going to send you down a path where you're not going to be successful long term. That's a fact. And so when I think of organizations that are functional, that create that culture of we, as soon as I see a culture of winning, then I start measuring how often does the leader say I versus we, me versus us. And it can just become obvious like that because the I-focused person wants immediate gratification. Whereas people are willing to build that culture of we is really much more delayed on maybe delayed gratification because they're looking for long-term success versus short-term winning.
Fantastic response. Jeff?
Yeah, Mark, I agree completely. I think when somebody says that phrase, the create a winning culture, I almost immediately tune it out because I do think it's just speak, and I don't see value there. I think it's messy, and it requires leaders who can be open and honest and deal with hard truths. Okay. First off, as leaders, we screw up a lot. Okay. And I think we need to apologize and own when we make those screw ups. And I think when you're looking at an organization and you see the leader not taking ownership of how the organization's performing, I think you know it's a shallow culture. And I think it's hard, messy work, but I think it's very gratifying because you connect with people. You build these relationships and you actually impact people's lives. We have some like one of my favorite employees in the company is one who simply says thank you to me and to our leadership team on little things that we do as we run the company. And it's not a big deal, maybe a quick email, but every time I look forward to that because I know they sincerely appreciate it. And to me, you know, you're making an impact on somebody's lives when they feel appreciation.
Also, continuing on, Jeff, this is a really short question, but I think absolutely one of the most profound that we've asked to this point. How can one measure success?
I think of it as buy-in. I think of it as an understanding and an ability for the individuals in an organization to be bought into the culture. They 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 live it, they want it that way. Now that they see what's possible and how they're able to connect with each other and relate with each other and have fun with each other and compete together and lift each other up, it's it's fun. And that buy-in to me is how you know that you're actually succeeding as an organization.
Mark, same question. I know you've seen success and tried to measure it from many different perspectives across your life and career.
Ben, I love this question. I don't like this question. I love this question. And the Coach and the Geek, building a kick butt culture, we actually get into this specific issue as to what does success feel like? What does it look like? How do you measure it? And the basis of the book, when you really boil it down, was how do you build that culture of we? And then what are the important behaviors that it takes to be successful, both on the floor and off the floor? And this is in a competitive environment, but it applies to business today as well. And what we decided to do was really look at what we call CBEs, career best effort stats. And these are behaviors that are fulfilling, but they don't take any talent, Ben. They just take concentration and effort. An example would be the Jordan High School Beat Diggers. Okay, that's a real school in Utah. The Jordan High School Beat Diggers, who played the #1 and the #2 teams in the state recently and got waxed. They didn't play very well. During that time, right before they played these two teams, they incorporated what we call our Focus app. The Focus app is designed for a coach to evaluate concentration and effort. Are they hustling? Their hustle stats, if you will. Then it'd be a thing like if you shoot the ball, I just come at you with both hands up and try to distract your shot. That's called challenging the shot. Doesn't take any talent. I'm 5'10" and a half. I don't jump very well anymore. You know, I'm 64 years old, but if I'm giving you the concentration and effort that you prescribe as being successful, I've done my job. The Jordan High School Beat Diggers went from losing against those two really good teams, and their concentration effort stats were way below average because we prescribe where it needs to be for a team to be successful. The second game, Ben, they got a little better, and they lost the #1 team in the state. But Trace Bevel, the head basketball coach, walked into their locker room, and his kids felt good about their performance. Why? Because they improved from that baseline against the #2 team. They were much better against the #1 team. They lost by 20 points, but yet they felt that they had been successful in what was prescribed for them and what was demanded of them as a culture to give concentration and effort in specific areas that Trace can actually track with our app and let a person know, did you do it or did you not? Then they play a third game where they improved again. And I'll be doggone, they won by 1 point. And so as we look at measuring success, oftentimes you got to get down to the activity of, are we doing successful behaviors on and off the court in our professional jobs and as fathers and husbands? To complete that role off the court or in my personal life, if you will, I'm a businessman now, but in my personal life, do I tell my wife I love her 2 times a day? Yes, I do. And we've been married 31 years. That's called long-term success. Do I spend 15 minutes alone with my teenage son? I've got 4 boys. 3 of them are now off on their own and very successful. And I've got a 15-year-old son. All I want to do is spend 15 minutes alone with my son every single week. Now, typically it's more than that because we did a survey, Ben, that showed that college athletes and high school athletes, we asked them, how much time do you spend with your head coach alone for 15 minutes just to talk about life in general? We gave them 3 options: once a week, once a month, never. 52% said never. 41% said maybe once a month. Well, then as a leader, why don't we spend time with our people? It doesn't take any talent to do that. It just takes concentration and effort to invest time in the most important resource we have, which is our team members. So to close it out on success, measure behaviors that don't take any talent, measure behaviors that take concentration and effort, and see how your team does against the expectation. That's how we measure success at Lighthouse. That's how I measure success in my own personal life.
Phenomenal conclusion to another great episode of this podcast of The Coach and the Geek with Mark Adams of ESPN, Jeff Van Fleet of Lighthouse Technologies, excuse me. Glad to have you again here, gentlemen, on this episode. So looking forward to future ones with you. Thank you for being with us today.